Good evening and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Defining Virtuosity. My name is Odin Rathnam. The next Wohlfahrt study that I would like to walk you through is number 11, marked Moderato. In this etude, again, I advise my students to focus on getting the left hand motions accurate, the actions accurate and correct and relaxed by practicing slurs and being very strict about the rhythm of the lifts and drops, crossings, etc., etc. It's in 2/4 time with triplet semiquavers, 16th notes. So we'll do 6-note slurs, and in terms of the tuning, slightly lowered A flats and E flats so that the D's and G's sound like leading tones and Pythagorean thirds, respectively. That's how I decided to tune it. I like the way it sounds. Same when we move into the dominant key halfway through the study, the second line, second measure. We'll treat B flat major the same way, as close enough to So first we'd go through nice and easy in the bow. As long as the bow's clear for each 6-note slur, it doesn't have to have any energy or volume really in it. Just a nice, even, clear tone. When the left hand is secure, we can begin discussing the different strokes. It's marked to be played spiccato and with a number of patterns of combined slurs and separate notes. Again, when I go to these separate strokes, the bow is now articulating. So I would actually articulate even less in the left hand at that point to stay relaxed. Once you have articulation in this hand, think extremely legato when you go through with the spiccato strokes or the sautier in the faster tempi. So again, here we work at the balancing point of the bow for the slowest version of the spiccato, and we observe the rules that once we've established the plane, within that plane the arm has a sense of hanging. The wrist is slightly above the elbow, the fingers curled, the thumb slightly bent, so that there's flexibility, the ability to straighten more or curl more in the fingers. If we lock and press the stick with opposing fingers, the base knuckles of the fingers are no longer springs. They stick up like that. It's okay if we're dangling the bow to see them like that, but pressing against the bow, they lock, and we don't have any more flexibility here, because this is a spring and this is a spring. Believe it or not, this spring is very related to the thumb, because the thumb, unlike the other fingers, has its nail knuckle here, second knuckle there, and its base knuckle at the wrists. That's what an opposing thumb is. And therefore, if this is locked and can't do bending, if you can't see your thumb able to bend down under the bow and go above it, the wrist will also be locked. In addition to that vertical motion, it also moves side to side. That's what I say when I'm talking about waving to the queen, or this kind of motion, freedom this way. Okay? All of that has to be there when we do these strokes at the balancing point. The bow is held very lightly in the hand, and the contact with the string almost comes entirely from the bow's own weight. You see, I can even take the pinky off if I don't need it. Or just let it gently sit there. If I squeeze the pinky, immediately I've raised the bow off the string. The bow's natural ability to drop to the string is lost. We can do that deliberately when we want to lift a note out of the string, but not by accident. So the next fundamental stroke is that triplet spiccato or brush stroke. All right, this. So within this, we can do all kinds of shapes. You could practice crescendos going up. Maybe very softly. Many of my students, when they start learning spiccato, do this from their shoulders. So if we think a little out and in and hang the arm more, we can correct that very quickly. So if you go in on the down bow, you're now trying to do this tiny stroke with your big shoulder muscle. And I think that smaller strokes should be left to smaller groups of muscles and bigger strokes to bigger groups of muscles. So I don't mind the shoulder moving in the course of a long note because it'll drop in from the triangle to the square and it'll go back out slightly for the large triangle. In Galamian's book, Principles of Violin Playing and Teaching, in the chapter on the right hand, there are photographs, I believe, of these three shapes: the triangle, the square, the big triangle. But in repeated strokes, we want the stroke to come from the wrist and fingers and elbow, right? And we don't want to involve the shoulder. If you're doing it more, you add a little elbow. If it's less elbow, and really feel that tiny bit of difference between more curled, less curled, so that the shorter strokes still catch the string. Yeah, what we would use, again, in Beethoven's scherzo from the Eroica, for example. So after you've learned the spiccato and the various tempi, you can do the bowing two slurred, and then four separate, two slurred, and four separate. That way, you know? Always thinking out and in and hanging here. Avoid pronation of the shoulder joint this way, which raises the elbow. Supinate at the shoulder and hang. If the distance, the height between the wrist and the arm becomes too great, lower the wrist rather than raising the elbow to get the things on a similar plane. The wrist should be ever so slightly higher than the elbow, okay? This can then be practiced 2 down, 4 up. Again, these impulses come from sort of the wrist and finger, a little bit from a more pronated, that's turned this way, position, snapped to a supinated, releases. But the reattachment to the pronated side is very important, and the arm should not be affected in terms of its height up and down, or we'll lose a consistent leverage point. We need a consistent leverage point so that we can control the amount of pinch that those staccatos get. And you just carefully listen to your, you can even practice it lifting it off. Then we can practice it 2 down, 1 up. Curl, 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 curl. Curling brings us over to the supinated position of the hand, and we bend the thumb for the arm to move. Very relaxed arm on the slur, slower bow speed. Now we can add the accent. Then a little tempo. You can also put this together with the down, up, up bowing, where you alternate. This is very good for certain quartet minuets of Mozart, where we encounter this bowing of down, up, down, up, up, down. Inner voices in, I believe, the minuet of the dissonant, yeah? While we have ba, ba, dee, da, dum, ba, dee, ya, da, dum, and you have be, ya, da, pa, 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 be, ya, da, pa, 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 da, ya, pa, 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 pa. So it's good to practice that bowing so that it's very comfortable when we encounter it in the repertoire. The final bowing would be accenting the first note, 3-note slur with an accent on the 3rd note. Yeah? So if you do these different patterns, you'll get quite a bit of benefit out of it. Oh, I did forget one. I like practicing things with an uncomfortable backwards bowing, because sometimes in a pinch we have to do something for a few notes that isn't the ideal relationship of down on the lower string, up on the upper string. So also practice it backwards. Up, up. And so on and so forth. I hope this is helpful. Enjoy your time with this study. It's a very good one. And let me know your thoughts and your comments or questions. I hope you'll subscribe to my page and share with friends. Have a good evening.